All right, this is Practicing Happy podcast number 8. I looked it up this time.
Hmm.
It's going to be.
I really didn't think you would, but impressed.
I did it. I got the tab open. Number 8, which is going to be actually the second part of our discussion of information hygiene. So, last time we were talking about just the basic idea that you should be as concerned with what you put into your mind as you are with what you put into your body, right? You wouldn't you wouldn't eat rotten food. You shouldn't consume rotten ideas, rotten media.
What's the
And
best example of rotten media you can think of?
for me,
What jumps
it's
out at you?
100% AM radio,
Okay, yeah,
right? I
bad.
know human beings who have started listening to talk radio because they're just like, I'm on my commute. It's ridiculous, like these people are crazy.
Yeah.
6 months, a year down the line, they're buying it 100%, right? They're scared, they're upset, they're just agitating themselves, right?
Yep.
That's that's really unfortunate, and it comes out of this sort of hubris. We all think that we are so savvy in the consumption of information, and we're not. We're not good at it, and I don't know that it's possible to be good at it. I don't think.
No, because media is designed to work around those things.
Yeah, we have 100 years of people developing expertise in manipulating the way that we perceive the world for their own financial gain. We call it either propaganda or marketing or advertising or what have you, right? And it's a really strange thing, right? Like if somebody designs a computer program that gets a hold of your credit card information and they use it to buy a bunch of stuff, that's a crime, right?
Hmm.
But if somebody designs an idea that causes you to buy a bunch of crap you don't need, they get an award.
Totally.
Right? But both
Yeah.
of them had the same effect, that your limited resources in life have been transferred to another party because of an information effect, a programmatic effect on an information processing system that's important to your life. In one case, your computer, in the other case, your brain. And I feel like the latter is actually worse.
It kind of is, and something that speaks directly to your point today. I don't know if you saw it front page of Reddit, but the Canadian diamond escapade.
No, I have no idea.
So check this out. This guy goes on this massive witch hunt, basically, like that. A lot of the major diamond corporations right now that sell online, like Blue Nile and these other ones, are talking about how their diamonds are not blood diamonds. They're no zero conflict diamonds, and that they're certified Canadian. And
Okay.
so he goes to look into this, and what he finds out, he buys a diamond ring from him. He has it shipped to him. He gets a little paper that says certified Canadian, but it has no identifying information of like what mine it came from in Canada or any serial numbers or how to trace it back. And so none of these diamonds can be traced. And what he finds out is that all of the online companies are sourcing their diamonds from India.
Okay.
They come to India from various places across the world. You can't track any of them. Only the diamond certifications number you can track, but they get recertified all the time, so the number changes. So a diamond that was certified over and over and over again, you have no idea what the original mine was. And so
Mm-hmm.
the online inventories change every day based on recertification process and people buying them out and where they're coming from. And so what he found out is that all of these diamonds, none of them are all of these diamonds that are claiming to be Canadian sourced diamonds, none of them are verifiably Canadian sourced.
Mm-hmm.
But people have been buying zero conflict Canadian sourced diamonds for 10 years now. And all it
Yeah.
was is just a piece of paper. It's a giant scam. But again, it relates back to what you're saying about like what kind of media we consume and what kind of like, you people just wholeheartedly believed like they were doing the right thing, buying the right kind of diamonds, and it's
Yeah.
like
And
not verifiable.
the barriers come down as soon as somebody is willing to offer us a piece of information that serves our own self-image. Just the moment, like, oh yeah, I'm a good person if I do this.
Yep.
I'm not going to look too carefully at it,
Yeah, totally.
right? That's all of politics, right? I'm not going
Yeah.
to look too carefully at the situation when my guy wins and when the other guy wins. Everything's crooked.
Or another great example of that is, and I know we're off on a tangent here, but I think it's
Oh
important to
yeah.
discuss anyways, as Beyonce with her women empowerment clothing line, and all of that clothing was being made by women in a sweatshop in a third world country.
All right.
So
Yeah.
it's like, You know what I mean? You're buying these products feeling great about
Yeah.
what your message is, and it's being made by the opposite message.
Yeah, well, it has to do with really what interest are you serving? Are you trying to create a positive effect in the world, or are you trying to create a positive effect
In your
for
bank
yourself?
account, yeah.
Right? Like very often, if you look at people's advocacy, if you look at people's engagement with serious issues, what you quickly discover is that these people are interested in feeling like they're doing the right thing more than they're interested in actually doing a thing that serves any obvious interest. Right? So I'm a person who's really into these things, and I'm a total jerk about it. 100% of the time, all I do with my advocacy is turn people off of the cause that I am celebrating. But you know what? I'm out here. I'm advocating, so I'm a good person. I feel good about myself. It's like, oh, what do you really want to do? Do you want to feel good, or do you want to do good?
It's an important distinction.
Uh,
So back to information hygiene.
Anyways, bringing it on back, information hygiene. So we're talking about that. We're rapping about that. We talked about some things. I broke things up into a couple of categories. Oh yes, protecting your baseline. There we go. So I looked it up, but I didn't actually. I lost my notes. So there you are. And I promised that we would talk about sort of this other topic, which I don't have a handy name for, but it's just making decisions when you have the advantage is a huge part of information hygiene, and it's based upon a simple idea that we're not that good at regulating our consumption while we're consuming. So the example that I can give for you, the metaphor for me, is I just don't buy stuff that has a lot of sugar in it.
Hmm.
Because if there's candy in the house, I will eat all the candy. And I
Right.
will eat nothing else until all of the candy is gone.
We talked about this last week, and I think going back to it, like it's the same thing for me. If I order a pizza and nobody's around,
Oh yeah,
I'm I'm eating all of that pizza.
it's
Like the whole
gone.
day. Like that's a whole pizza getting eaten by me. I and I
Hmm.
and I always say to myself like, oh, I'll eat part of it now and part of it later. It's like, nope. Once the pizza's there, once it's in
Yeah,
your face.
it's just nonstop pizza train directly into your gullet. Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's me. Like I will literally be sitting there thinking to myself, geez, I feel sick from eating that half a pound of Reese's peanut butter cups. I need to go into the kitchen and eat something else.
Right.
And then I go into the kitchen and I'm looking and I'm like, I could cook this, I could cook this, I could cook this, and my hand's already in the bag, grabbing more Reese's peanut butter cups. And it's like I'm just sitting there unconsciously open. That's just the reality of it for me, right?
So
Um,
so then echoing that out to media, like
so
pulling a parallel.
that's a recognized cognitive deficiency for me, right? My desire to consume sugar is deep and profound, and when it's right there, I don't have a very good ability to curb it. So what I do instead is I just plan my life around the fact that okay, I want to have a lower sugar intake. It's not going to be in the house, right? It's not going to be available. It's because once there's a small hurdle between me and the consumption, that
Hmm.
hurdle creates the opportunity to reflect. Right? While I'm overcoming that, if I'm walking over to the store to go get ice cream because I got a sweet tooth going, mid walk, I'm just going, do I really need this? Okay, what else do I need at the store? And then the other advantage, of course, is loss aversion, which is this well-known phenomenon. We don't like losing the experience of losing things, right? So losing like $10 is more painful to a human being than getting $10 is pleasurable. It's just this weird asymmetry that was totally unaccounted for in economic theories before like 1980. Basically, psychologists found out about it in the 60s and 70s. And so I'm just like, I'm going to use loss aversion to my benefit, right? Because when I'm sitting there holding in my hand the candy, the ice cream, if I've made it as far as the grocery store, right? The fact that I'm going to have to give up money to actually walk out with it is a powerful check. And that puts me in a place where it's like I can actually make a decision here that is correct, right? So I make all of my sugar consumption decisions when I have either some hurdle between me and it, there's a time lag or there's a space, there's a distance between me and the consumption, or I have something like loss aversion on my side.
Yeah.
So that is how I also think about media consumption, right? So if I'm sitting down and I'm going to watch, some episode of some show, and if it's on Netflix and it's just next episode, it's right there. There's that button. This episode finishes, it's ready to start the next one. Heck, it might even skip the credits for me. So easy to spend all day doing that.
Yep.
Right? So I make my decisions about what I'm going to consume in advance, how long I'm going to do it, how many episodes, and very often, same as the sugar, I just don't. Personally, that's a choice that I make. Other people make different choices, and that's going to depend on their psychological makeup. But for me, it generally tends to be, do I really need to watch that? I don't think so. Acknowledging that it's good, acknowledging that people derive a lot of pleasure from watching that, and that's great. That's totally rad that people enjoy this thing that I'm not going to partake in, right? There doesn't have to be any judgment about it, but just this isn't really what's going to be healthy for me.
That's a big catch right there. I think that's where a lot of people's trouble starts, is, and something for myself as well, that, you're missing out on what everybody else is enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not in a place that's productive for you or healthy for you, you're not going to be enjoying it to the fullest anyways. You're never going to feel quite right about what you're consuming. But people, I think, get hung up on like, well, everybody else is experiencing this.
Mm-hmm.
And if I miss out on that, it's going to be a huge bummer.
Yeah, it's real hard. For me, that's me with a lot of video games, right?
Totally same.
Everybody's playing this video game, and a bunch of my buddies from forever play video games, so I kind of want to play this thing, even if I don't really particularly enjoy it as a standalone experience. The social opportunities around it are really valuable, and that's the classic water cooler conversation. Did you catch the big game last night? Right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to have that interaction.
I think that interaction is healthy to an extent. But if it's taking shape in a way that consumes your life, it's not.
Yeah.
No longer as healthy. And I think one of the things for me that you're talking about setting hurdles, and I just kind of set merit-based rewards for myself on consumption of different things. Whether it be binging The Office with my wife or playing video games with our group of friends. I set time limits. So I wake up in the morning, and I just have general rules on my days off, like, yeah, I'm going to play some video games today. I'm not allowed to start playing them until after I've done X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
Once X, Y, and Z are completed, I can play for this long. And I give myself a time frame, like, okay, it's 11 now. I'm going to play till 1:30. That's 2.5 hours. That's a crazy amount of time to play if you think about it, for somebody who's trying to be a responsible, productive adult. And then after that, I have X, Y, and Z to do again. And if I complete all those things, great. My time is my own. But until then, like, you know what I mean? So I think that setting the thresholds for what you need your life to look like is important around consumption.
Mm-hmm. So that's the idea, right? Is you made that decision in advance. You don't make the decision about how much you want to play the video game while you're playing the video game.
Nope.
You don't make the decision about how much TV you want to watch while you're watching TV. You do it at a separate time, which is the argument. Of course, this is one of the many things that one can be doing as part of a formal introspective practice. I know I'm a broken record on this point, but that can be something that's incorporated also into your day. Just like, this is going to be the time when I sit down and decide what my life needs to look like.
Yeah.
Right? What does my life need to look like in the next 12 hours, in the next 24 hours, in the next week, in the next month, in the next decade, in the next century, right? All those time scales, you got to take account of them at some point.
Somebody taught me something in trying to help me improve myself, and that was he had me set an alarm for the same time every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my time to just, it was a reminder, sit down, check in with yourself, figure out how you're feeling, figure out how you're managing everything around you, and decide what you want for yourself next, or what kind of self-care things need to go into the next like hour to like however long your day is. And I would do that at 3 p.m. because for me, my general workday, the lull comes at 3 to 4 p.m. And so at 3 p.m., my alarm would go off. I'd go sit in my office, be like, okay, let's take stock. What's happened today? What's going to happen after this? How do I want to adjust to those things? How am I feeling? What do I need to be a success over the next 6 hours of my workday?
Mhm.
And what I didn't realize at the time is that that check-in needed to happen for me as well, not
Yes.
just for my professional work life, but for what my needs were, like in order to be a successful like person and feel happy. So
Yeah.
I recommend the end of your day, or either at the beginning of your day, like those nice end cap time periods of setting an alarm and just being like, all right, like I'm putting down the phone. Nothing is going to draw my attention right now. Like, let's take a moment. Let's pull ourselves away from all of the wonderful distraction that life offers and just really think about what our situation is and what we want to do next.
Mhm. So the extremist version of that is when I was at the monastery, it, when people were really struggling, we'd have them on 15-minute timers.
Yeah.
Right, every 15 minutes, an alarm goes off, and it's, what am I doing right now? What are actually the circumstances of my life? What narrative have I been paying attention to in my head? When was the last time I saw the space that I'm in?
Yeah.
Right. And just really getting people oriented to stepping out of the trenches of their life,
Yeah.
because we can get, things are going right, and they're going, and decisions are being made, right, but no thoughts going into them. We're on autopilot, right, or we're reacting 100% in sort of the survival way because we're really close to our experience. We're really engaged in it. We need
And
to
you
train
people,
ourselves. Go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry.
We just need to train ourselves to step back, to take sort of, to start taking the 10,000 foot view, the 40,000 foot view, right? Really in the big picture, what's going on here.
And don't underestimate, like for all you people out there that work hard and have busy days, that this isn't, that this maintenance gets taken care of during your lunch break when you're eating for a moment, or when you finally get home and you settle into bed. Because, if you're like me and a lot of other people, you're engaged in a set of mental exercises and conversations in your head that are relating back to the same stuff you were just doing at work or wherever else.
Mhm.
It's important to not keep fighting the fight once you're no longer in the battle.
Oh yeah, you can be in that awful meeting for weeks,
Yep,
you
you
know,
really can.
after you get out of it, because it's just replaying in your head how you felt, how this should have been, how these people were, you know, all
And
sorts
guess
of
what?
things.
When you're in that mindset, it becomes very, very hard to make decisions and consume media and do anything that sets your life up to make you happy. You're not at an advantage to make those decisions when you're in that mental state.
Hmm. You have to get space, right? That's the number one thing. You have to create an opening for the information to come through, right? Like you have this wonderful innate faculty of intelligence. Your brain is a wonderful thing. It's trying to supply you with the information that you need to live a healthy, happy, rewarding life constantly, but you got to have the space to receive it. The metaphor that I like, which comes from Huineng's Platform Sutra, wonderful book, um, is, that Huineng said your internal wisdom is like the sun. It's always shining. Sometimes it's cloudy and you can't see the sunlight, but the sunlight's always there,
Yep.
right?
Always got to
You got
find a
it.
way to part those clouds.
Exactly. And when you make that space in your life, when you have a structure that says this is the time when you pay attention to you, what's happening in your life, what needs to happen right now to take care of you, that just creates a little opening. Boom, here comes the sunlight. And you get tons of information about,
Totally.
here it is. And it feels great. That's the thing that I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough, right? Like that experience feels incredible.
Yeah, totally. You have all sorts of new ideas. You have direction. You have purpose for a moment. You feel good about where you're at in your life for a moment.
It's the experience for me. It's the experience of strength,
Yeah.
actually, in a strange sort of sense that it's the experience that it doesn't actually matter what's going on right now because I'm equal to it. I
Hmm.
have the resources available to me right now to do the thing. Doesn't matter what the thing is. It's gonna happen. When you open up that space, you get to have that experience. And when you train yourself well enough, you get to have that experience more and more and more because you can eventually, just like anything, get to the point where you're opening up that space unconsciously.
That is an incredibly strong place to be. That'd be a place I'd like to be able to
right?
eventually just go
It's
back to
that
it.
it's that formal sitting practice that I keep talking about. I know nobody wants to take me up on that one.
I
I would
also
talk to me, how's meditation going? They're just like, it's not
it's
going in
not.
the slightest.
I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
I think it's important too to point out that like you may not be aware of like how habitual and how routine it is for you to just consume media.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
like I remember when I started taking BART daily, I would have an hour trip into the city, and when I started taking BART, I was like, okay, I'm on BART for an hour. It's time for me to read all the books I wanted to read and listen to all the TED Talks I've been meaning to listen to and study up on a few things that interest me and learn. And what taking BART every day morphed into was I'm browsing Reddit and
Hmm.
Facebook for an hour while listening to music, so not really absorbing anything and staring out the window for part of it. And not
Hmm.
really, you know, it was a wonderful gift of time where I could set myself up with some nice quiet music and really have some introspection and reflection, and I used none of it. So uh, knowing that I was not capable of making those decisions in the moment then, I just want to urge people to just kind of be aware that, like, take a moment in your daily routines and realize that there's more space in them than you might imagine for introspection and to set yourself up to be happy because they're there and you're just using them for other things at the moment.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's incredible how much time can go by doing nothing.
Yep.
Right. And that's the thing is, introspection is an incredibly productive activity. Right. People have this idea essentially of navel gazing, and that's something, I was made to read a book in sixth grade as part of my honors gate English class that basically said meditation is a bunch of hogwash and those people are useless weirdos.
Hmm.
Right. That's all over the place in our culture. Right.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's selfish to take time to attend to your own needs is very, very big in our culture, right? Because you could be doing something for somebody else or doing something like good Anglo-Saxon productivity work, right? And it's like, actually, I would like to spend a little bit of time working right here
Yeah.
on making this a serviceable experience. Um, and it's incredibly productive because when you're having that experience of strength, you get a lot more done when you feel good about yourself and good about what you can accomplish in the world. That's a tremendous source of motivation compared to, you know, when you're tired and when you're completely drained because you've been in a state of attention all day consuming media
Yeah.
that hasn't added anything.
And I don't want, and just recall, like, too, like, the world's different than it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Like, you know, the level of distraction and the level of media consumption is 1,000% more accessible than it ever was for our parents and
Hmm.
our grandparents. And so we're on the new frontier. We're pioneers in a world that is insanely wonderful, wonderfully full of distraction.
Yeah.
So
So
I
here's
think,
the
and I
thing.
just want to like make a point really quick. I think that this is part of the problem, right? Like I think that the reason we're seeing such a boom in mental illness and things that people not feeling um, adequate or happy and miserable in general is that, like, I think that there was a lot more space for sorting things out mentally beforehand. It was some more quiet time. You know what I mean? Heck, like 3 generations ago, the lights went out. You know what I mean? At like 6 and 7 p.m.
Yeah.
and you were alone with your thoughts.
Well, I mean, there are a number of things there, but I don't want to derail us, right? Like
Okay.
I'm a little more optimistic about the world is at present, but we are definitely things are changing. The way that our brains store information is changing, right? The
Right.
expectation that you can Google anything is changing the way that people recall information,
Yeah.
right? And I remember just the other day telling somebody, you don't have to remember this, just remember that it exists.
Right.
All right. It was a simple thing. We're talking about Fibonacci numbers and some test. You know, somebody was working on a programming challenge, and because they thought they were going to be taking an interview, and they're talking about, do you know any any ways to improve on a basic recursive Fibonacci implementation. It's like, well, yeah, there are all these things, but also there's a formula, right? You're going to have to be able to explain generating functions if you want to use that, but just remember that it exists because you might have to implement something down the road.
Yeah.
And that's the way that we actually engage with information a lot of time.
Yeah.
We don't need to remember that many facts anymore. We have a supercomputer in our pocket. But you're very right to say that the world is not quiet. You have so many streams of information vying for your attention at any given time that it really is outside of sort of the space that our brains were designed by evolution to function well in.
Yeah.
And if we go back, if you look back to people trying to be happy human beings for thousands of years, right? We have the records. People were struggling with this stuff 3,000 years ago.
Fair enough.
Right?
That's great to know.
But yeah, oh yeah, right? People were miserable and challenged and having all sorts of unfortunate experiences thousands of years ago, right? That's comes through loud and clear if you read, all the old Hindu scriptures or Buddhist scriptures or even Judeo-Christian tradition scriptures, right? People were really struggling with this really similar issues to what we're struggling with. But they had so much more time to pay attention, right? Because if you're going to work out in a field all day and nobody outside of your family is going to even communicate with you in a given week, right? Like you meet up with people on Sundays at church or temple or what have you, but for the most part, you have very few information streams in your life, right? If it's still a challenge under those circumstances, if people are still really struggling to get their house in order, to have a fulfilled experience, how much more difficult must it be when we are so plugged in, so connected, when a single bad idea can spread around the world overnight?
Yeah.
Right?
It's dark out there, people.
It's tricky. It's tricky. It's difficult. But the thing is, we know so much more now, right? We know so much more about how the human organism functions. We know so much more about how the brain processes information. We have all sorts of tools for understanding some of these effects. So, I really think the challenge is greater, but also we're better equipped.
Right. I think I think in my spiral there, that's what I was pointing at, is that like I think you articulated it well, so I don't think it doesn't bear repeating, but again, the level of distraction is so much greater now in this moment.
It's so much greater, but we've never had more opportunities to right the ship. We've never had more tools. We've never had more education. I was talking to my grandmother. She's been a Buddhist for 40 years, right? When I was really studying, really getting stuck into some sutras, I think I managed to put together a little library of about 30 or 40 primary Buddhist source texts, right? And she just kind of looked at this and went, when I was getting started, we had 2 books in English, period. You wanted to know anything, you had to go to Japan.
That's incredible.
And now it's every Buddhist sutra is available for free on the internet. And it's that way with pretty much every major tradition you're interested in. You can buy nicer translations and commentaries and all that kind of stuff, but the raw source material is out there, right? You can go to Bible.com and read 40 different translations of the Bible right now. If you're not sure what Jesus was talking about, that's all right. You can see all the commentaries with all the differences of opinion in the last 2,000 years, right?
No, and that's incredible. And I think that it works in another way too. An example, I go to this place called Black Diamond Games not far from my home to browse board games and buy cards and do random things that make me happy. And I have no fucking clue how to get there. None.
Yep.
But I've driven there like 10 times. But my navigation system does that. And so what am I doing for the rest of that drive? Like I'm singing and talking to my baby in the back seat, or I'm thinking about like work or my wife or my dog or any other number of things that like I want to be different, and so it does, to an extent, all the technology and all the amazing things that have come about in the last couple of years buys us sometimes for those things.
Yeah, yeah. We might want to, go back in the editing process and take your wife out of that list because you ended that sentence with things I want to be different.
I didn't even. Sorry.
Yeah, you gotta
That's
listen. These
but
things
the
are
thoughts.
dangerous.
Those thoughts are disconnected in my mind. But
Yeah, yeah, but
yeah, I want her to be different.
yeah,
If she could
language
just
is
be any person other than who she is right now, that would be great.
yeah, language is malleable. It can take so many shapes in the minds of others. Just gotta be careful. But like just about every other time that we've talked about editing, we'll probably just leave it in because it's funny. Did I lose you, Dan? Hello, Dan. Did Kelly take you down? Is it over? Oh well, Dan's dead now. You hate to see it. Hate
Sorry
to
for the
see it
interruption
happen.
there.
I was just like, oh well, did Kelly take you out?
No, she's still in Seattle. The dog
Oh,
got a hold
okay.
of something he wasn't supposed to get a hold of, and I needed it back quickly because my dog has eaten several pairs of my sandals, and I only have the one left.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if I'm without those, I can't walk around the hot weather. So
House. I remember house sitting for you.
yeah.
15 seconds in, he had already ripped the tail light off of my bike and destroyed it.
So I
I hadn't
apologize for the
even got the
interruption.
kick. I hadn't even got the kickstand down yet. It's a
So let's
clever
get
one.
back to the core here.
Yeah. So the basic idea is roughly what we were talking about. Is that second part of information hygiene, right? So once you're aware of the concept, now how do you apply it? And the main thing is don't make choices about consumption while you're consuming, right? And find advantages. Find out what your biases are and figure out how you can use them to serve making the right choices, right? So I know that it's painful for me to part with those dollars in exchange for those calories. And so I make all of my decisions about, am I going to eat sugar at the grocery store, not at the fridge?
Yeah.
You know, that comes from self-knowledge. You only get that self-knowledge by if you're paying attention to who you are. That's that formal introspection practice, right? Setting aside a time where all you are doing is getting to know yourself. And you can expand on it a little bit and add a little planning phase in there, getting to know what it is you want your day to be like.
Or just knowing when enough is enough of a certain thing for you.
Yeah, yeah,
If it's not productive and healthy for your life, if it's a type of consumption that's not beneficial to you, like take steps to cut it out, or at the very least make it minimal.
yeah. And pro tip, right? Focus on sustainability.
Yeah.
Don't make big changes,
Yep.
right? Because your mind as it is currently is in equilibrium, right? It's in a ground state. To to get somewhere else, you have to push yourself into a disequilibrium, right? It's like an equilibrium state is like a marble at the bottom of a bowl, right? If you leave it alone, it stays at the bottom of the bowl. If you want to get the marble somewhere else, you have to push it until it is over the lip of the bowl and falls out, and then it'll roll somewhere else and it'll find its way to a new equilibrium, right? So that always requires some injection of energy, right? And if you make a really, really, really big change, it's probably going to be unsustainable, right? If you go from I am eating a pint of ice cream every day to I am never eating sugar again in my life, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to stick to that,
Yeah. It's awful difficult.
right?
I quit smoking a year ago, and I stopped cold turkey. Um, but what I did is I used an empty tobacco pipe and I puffed on it with nothing in it
Mm-hmm.
for 2 to 3 months. because it was habitual for me to have something to like puff on.
Yeah.
And eventually I found like I didn't need that anymore.
That's that's a place where you're making the change as small as possible.
Yeah.
Right. I'm still having all these behaviors. I'm just not having the thing that's actually detrimental to me.
Yeah.
Right. And making a change that is something that you can stick to, right? Like, so maybe you do need to cut sugar out, right? Okay, leave the rest of your diet roughly the same and just see how that develops and see if you can get stable, find your way to a new balance without the sugar, and then make the other changes to your diet.
Totally.
Right.
And it's not bad to just like reward yourself a little bit either when you're making strides.
Yeah.
Some of my biggest successes around dieting in the past were days that I ate a cake pop from Starbucks every single day. I still lost 60 pounds in 7 to 8 months, but I ate a fucking cake pop every day.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
There's a voice in one's head that says we have to make all of the right choices all at once.
Yeah.
Right. And it's no, we really just need to make incremental progress.
Yep.
Right. Human beings change in the way that children grow. You don't actually generally see the difference day to day.
Nope.
Right. You lay out the markers, you make the little mark on the wall, and you can see year by year, well, something's really happening here. That's the same way that we have to make changes in our life if we want it to be sustainable.
I never knew how real that was until I had my parents were grandparents. I see my kid every day and I'm like, this is the same kid I saw every day. My dad comes to see her once a week, and every week he's like, this is a completely different baby.
Mm-hmm.
Does this now, does X, Y. Be the same thing with your life.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. No difference between your life and my baby.
No, not in the slightest. But, of course, you only notice that if you are making the markers, right? Because you see your experience of the world every day. And
Yep.
so it's hard to know the difference. And that's where we get into the discussion of, recording things, making records of what you think now, which is part of that introspective process, part of that formal practice. So
I would
that
like to, sorry, I would like to just
Mhm.
really make our next episode about that, well, solely, is just what our toolbox needs to look like around setting up, uh, again, it goes back to establishing the baseline, but in a more physical way.
Yeah. What are the
Practices
tools?
around
I'm
recordings
into it.
and
Sounds like
journaling.
we got our next episode planned out.
Yeah.
I mean, not really planned out. I'll probably actually write some things on a paper at some point, but we know what we're doing. It's great.
Cool.
Sounds like a good place to wrap it up.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, cheers.
I hope your days are happier. Take care.